Hi everyone, welcome to this morning's workshop on the narrative CV. And thank you, Rachel. It actually dovetails very nicely with many of the things you just discussed. I have some internet instability problems today, so if I start to phase out, just let me know and I'll actually shut down my video and carry on with my very quick introduction. Okay, so this is just a whistle-stop tour, and then we're going to actually open up to a discussion from some of your colleagues here today who've actually recently prepared a narrative CV. So a few tips. If I can just briefly introduce myself, I'm Jane Alfred. I'm a professional editor and trainer, and I specialise in providing training on responsible research practice, research integrity, peer review and publication ethics. And I do a lot of work that sits at the interface between good research practice, research integrity and research culture. And that's how I came to join the University of Glasgow's narrative CV project. So let's kick off with the narrative CV. So the aims of the narrative CV are to help you as researchers to share a much wider range of contributions that you've maybe have made to your research community in a consistent way, and also across a wide range of career paths and personal circumstances. And actually one of the aims of this new narrative CV format is to reduce our reliance on a narrow set of performance indicators, thinking here mostly about publications and funding awards. And another goal is to make it easier to assess, but also to reward and nurture a fuller range of contributions that researchers and academics make to their field or discipline. So this new CV format will look really unfamiliar to you, so give yourself time to get comfortable with it. And a top tip really is to look at other narrative CVs of your colleagues, and also as part of the narrative CV project, our aim is to provide you with some sample CVs to have a look at. The key thing to realise about the CV format is that it asks you to explain not what you have done or achieved, but rather how your work and activities have contributed to your field or discipline, to research team and the development of others, and to the wider research and innovation community. So, I think the key thing to remember is that you cannot answer a question that starts with how with a list. What you'll need to do with the CV is to write explanations instead, and to support them with examples drawn from a much wider range of research output and activities. And so that's great, because in many ways the CV format is really there to capture the full complexity of activities and outputs that you produce and engage in. But we recognise it can be really tricky to work out which examples should go where. And so we're aiming to help you with that too through the Narrative CV project by providing you with an enhanced narrative CV template that will give you more advice as to what to put where in this new format. So let me give you a very quick whistle-stop tour of the different sections before I open up the workshop to a broader discussion. Simply put, what should go where? Well, we kick off with section 1, which are where you put your personal details, such as your education, your key qualifications, your relevant positions, the funding you may have obtained and the awards you may have received. And I always say, start this with an introduction. Tell the assessor what you most want them to know about you in the opening 2 to 3 sentences. Picture you shaking your hand with your assessor. What do you want them to know as you shake their hand? So tell them your name, tell them about your current position and where you're working. Tell them about your area of research or the professional qualifications you really want them to know about. And if you feel passionate about what you do, it's fine to communicate that here too. Then you need to build a picture of your career to this point. So start with an overview of your qualifications in chronological order. So, for example, provide them with an explanation of the degrees you've obtained, where and from when and from where, the awards you've received and when, the qualifications and key relevant skills you've acquired, both in and out of academia. And then select some of the key funding that you want to tell them about that you've been successfully awarded. If it's still a long list, think about paring it down to make those examples relevant to that particular application. You may want to highlight here, for example, funding that you've been awarded in collaboration or for multidisciplinary research or for an industrial partnership. But do bear in mind, you have only 4 pages for this whole CV, so don't make this section too long. So we move on then to section 2, which is where you explain how you have contributed to the generation and flow of new ideas, hypotheses, tools, or knowledge. And again, you will need to choose here a small selection of key outputs to present. But the good news is you can present a much wider range of key outputs than you may have been normally putting in a traditional CV. So you could include here data sets you shared, software, conferences you may have organised or hosted, research and policy publications, and your open research outputs as well. And so you need to use these examples to describe how they have contributed to knowledge, ideas, and tools in your field. You can also describe here the skills you've acquired from previous research, innovation, or technical projects. But remember again, this is a how question, so just listing your publications and other outputs here alone won't work. So some relevant examples to include here might be your publications that have contributed specifically to knowledge, hypotheses, or tools in your field. Again, select good examples to support how you've done that. You may also be able to select policies that your research has informed. You may be able to describe here conferences, summits, or webinars or series you have organised, because these all help to promote the flow of knowledge and the flow and exchange of ideas in your field. You may include here open research outputs such as tools, code, software, or data sets you have shared, or you may be able to describe how your work has contributed to community standards in your field. You may also be able to include here patents or industrial partnerships and research outputs used by industry. So there's a real rich complexity of research outputs that you can include in this section. So then we move on to section 3, and section 3 asks, how have you contributed to research teams and the development of others? So again, this is another how question. So simply listing the number of students or teams you have supervised or the numbers of lectures you may have given won't work here alone. You also need to provide examples. So choose a few chosen examples to explain specifically how your teaching, your mentoring or supervision has contributed to the development of others. Specifically, what did you do? What kind of support and guidance did you give? You could also include here success stories of those you've managed or mentored. You might also include here examples of your involvement in EDI, research culture, or Athena Swan activities and committees, which are all good examples of how you've supported the development of others. And you may also be able to describe how your involvement in a research team has influenced or shaped the direction of that team's work. If you're working at a higher level, you may also be able to describe, for example, how as a team leader you shaped a team's direction, organisation or strategy, or even how your role as a team leader has shaped an organisation's direction, role and strategy. These are good examples of strategic team leadership to include. And then again, you may also be able to include how you've been involved in setting up a research team. This could include a collaboration, or it can include research networks or discussion or activity-based networks within or beyond your institute or organisation. So moving on to section 4. Section 4 asks you to describe how you've contributed to the wider research and innovation community. So think here broadly. Really good examples to include here may be that you're reviewing papers in your field, you may be an associate or academic editor for a journal in your field, you may be reviewing grants and applications. These are all really good examples to give here. You may belong to a society, you may sit on a committee within that society that's actively engaging in improving standards of research in that community. You may sit on a board or a panel, you may have been appointed to other positions of responsibility, including perhaps corporate roles, all excellent examples to demonstrate how you've contributed to your wider research and innovation community. You may have organised or presented at conferences, webinars or summits, and you may have actively contributed to improving research and innovation culture. Include those examples here as well. So let's move on finally to section 5. Section 5 asks you how you have exploited your research. And often we tend to think here how we've exploited our research for industrial purposes or for, for the development of new diagnostics and drugs. But you can think much more broadly here about how your skills and experience as a researcher have been exploited in a wider context. So that can include, for example, work you may have done in public outreach, in public engagement, or working with patient advocacy groups. You may also have examples to include of how your work is being used or translated into policy. That could be governmental, non-governmental, or industry. You may actually have examples to include here of how your work has been translated into industrial or biomedical applications. We often see included here also examples of involvement in industrial partnerships, where someone may have launched a spin-out company or patented their research findings, all fantastic examples of how you've exploited your research. Or you may have set up an international multidisciplinary collaboration to share more widely knowledge and expertise in your field. So just to briefly summarise then, think about capturing all of the rich complexity of your research outputs and activities in this new CV format. And whilst listening to Rachel, actually, I made a note to myself to say, don't forget to tell you that the skills and experiences you may have acquired during your 10 days of CPD might give you really good examples to include on your narrative CV. And then you just need to work out which section to include your different supporting examples. And a tip I'd give you here is to try to avoid repeating the same examples in different sections of the CV. Focus on explaining how and not what you've done. Practice writing your new CV. It may take a few goes to get your head around it. And then use the materials that the Narrative CV project will be providing you with. So examples of sample CVs to look at, and also hopefully an enhanced Narrative CV template that gives you more guidance about what to put where. All right, and so with that, I'm going to close and actually open up the workshop